Selene Nine hung above the white ice ring of Marivar like a blade held in cold light. It was a diplomatic station, built for treaties, threats, and the kind of peace that lasted only while armed ships waited just out of sight. Adrian Vale stood at the forward wall of the shuttle as the station widened across the glass. He had come as Earth's ambassador to hear the surrender terms the Tharos Empire claimed to offer, and he already suspected the visit was not meant to end in negotiation. Behind him, the rest of the delegation sat in a silence too controlled to be calm. Nobody needed the situation explained twice. Earth had lost leverage across too many frontier lanes. Tharos was pressing for submission under the language of order, and Selene Nine had been chosen because neutral ground was easier to manipulate than openly hostile space. Their orders were simple. Arrive alive, hear the terms, and by Earth whatever time was left. The problem was that time already felt sold to someone else. Nara's soul stepped up beside him. She led delegation security, and Adrian trusted her judgment more than anyone else on the shuttle. Outer docks are too active, she said. Council traffic? Some. The rest carry the Rose markings. That was the first thing wrong. Selene Nine was neutral ground, at least on paper, and the Rose military hulls had no reason to linger close enough to watch inbound traffic. Tomas Reed left his console and joined them. He was the delegation's communications specialist, a civilian who still looked more like he belonged in a university lab than on a shuttle carrying surrender papers. The port finally accepted our approach request, Tomas said, but they denied our relay handshake twice first. For what reason? Adrian asked. The console displayed a line that read priority routing adjustment in effect. That means somebody up there is deciding what leaves this station and what is not. Nara looked at Adrian. You still want the whole team to disembark? He considered that for only a moment. If they turned back, the Rose would call it refusal. If they docked blind, they walked into someone else's timing. We dock, Adrian said. No one separates. No private rooms. No private offers. And no one trusts an unlocked corridor. Tomas gave a thin smile. That covers most diplomacy. It covers this visit. The shuttle settled into the berth with a metallic shutter. Through the hatch view, Adrian saw a cleared receiving platform, layered security doors, and a reception lane that looked prepared without looking welcoming. When a hatch opened, the air felt too cold for comfort and too clean for a place that handled real traffic. It was not the cold of weather. It was machine-regulated, scrubbed and thinned until the berth felt less like a port and more like a prepared chamber. Adrian stepped down first, with Nara one pace behind him and Tomas close to his left. The rest of the delegation followed in a tight line. As he moved, he fixed the berth in simple anchors. Audiobook. Transparent blast walls. 2 security doors. 1 cargo lane to the left. 1 retreat path if the door stayed honest. If he had to run later, he wanted the path in his head before panic ever entered it. Halden Rusk waited at the front of the receiving party. He was Tharos' senior diplomatic representative to the council, tall and perfectly controlled, wearing a dark coat that seemed cut to announce authority before he spoke. Council officers stood near him in gray armor. Behind them waited a second line in black, plating marked with a narrow, angular crest of the Rose. Adrian counted weapons, distance, cover, and angles without turning his head. Nara was doing the same. Rusk inclined his head. Ambassador Vale. Welcome to Selene Nine. The Council appreciates Earth's decision to attend. Earth appreciates clarity, Adrian said. We came for that. A faint smile touched Rusk's mouth. Then let us hope today is useful. Useful. Adrian filed the word away at once. Men like Rusk rarely wasted small words. Useful did not sound like peace. It sounded like process, leverage, and an outcome already measured somewhere else. As they moved off the berth, Adrian kept building the station in plain mental anchors. Audiobook. Transit corridor. Diplomatic ring. If the meeting went bad, the mind remembered simple shapes faster than detailed maps. They were escorted through a polished corridor lined with narrow light bands and too many watching eyes. Every 20 paces, a port officer stood in a posture meant to look neutral and failed. Tomas drifted closer as they walked. Local network speed is wrong, he murmured. Internal pings are passing, but outbound traffic is already being squeezed. By the port, Adrian asked, or by someone who owns the port for the next few hours. Nara spoke without looking at either of them. Rear formation tightened after we crossed the hatch. They're closing our tail. That was the second thing wrong, and it was harder to explain away. Neutral stations did not quietly close around guests unless they feared violence or intended it. The corridor opened into Selene Nine's diplomatic ring, a broad circular level built to make power look civilized. Pale stone, glass, soft blue light, embassy sectors branching outward like spokes. Adrian saw the design at once. Calm in the middle. Control at every edge. They were led into a reception chamber overlooking Marivar's ice ring. The room was elegant, but one detail mattered more than the rest. There was only one clear route back into the corridor. The two side passages had already been shuttered. Adrian slowed for half a step. Nara noticed at once. "What is it?" she asked. "One way in," he said. "One way out." Russ turned. "Is there a concern, Ambassador?" "Only a practical one. This chamber appears more secure than necessary for a document exchange." "Tensions are high," Rusk replied. "The Council prefers order." Adrian took his seat because the room had already answered him. Security here was not protecting discussion. It was shaping movement. A council clerk brought out the sealed data slate. Rusk spoke for the Tharos in the clean language of legal aggression. Earth had destabilized frontier routes, threatened mutual security, and forced the Empire to seek immediate guarantees. In practical terms, the offer was simple. Earth would withdraw fleet presence from key sectors, surrender relay oversight in contested corridors, and accept monitoring under council review while final peace conditions were considered. Adrian listened without changing expression. When Rusk finished, he rested one hand on the slate. "These are not peace terms," Adrian said. "They are surrender terms written in cleaner language." "Call them what you wish," Rusk said. "Their purpose remains stability." "For whom?" Before Rusk could answer, Tomas leaned in slightly. Outbound route just narrowed again. "Someone is choking the line in real time." Adrian gave the smallest nod. Rusk folded his hands behind his back. "No one here benefits from delay." That was the first direct lie of the day. Delay was exactly what someone here feared. If they were tightening communications while the surrender terms were still warm on the table, timing mattered more than diplomacy. Someone needed the human delegation locked inside a sequence, and that sequence had started before Adrian ever sat down. He looked around the room again and saw the pattern more clearly. The side passages were sealed. The guard were not relaxed enough to be ceremonial. The council clerk had placed the data slate within view of the cameras, not within easy reach of consultation. Even the light felt staged, bright around the table and dimmer near the exits, as though the room had been designed not just to host a meeting, but to frame a record. Adrian let a measured silence pass. Then he said, "Earth will review what you have delivered. We request a secure transmission channel and a private consultation period." Rust's expression barely shifted, but something colder appeared behind it. "A secure channel can be arranged within procedure." Tomas's jaw tightened. That was answer enough. At the edge of the room, two Tharos security officers changed position. They were no longer guarding the chamber. They were guarding the exits. The whole picture settled into Adrian's mind at once. This was not a negotiation protected by security. It was a controlled environment waiting for a trigger. He rose. "My delegation requires immediate access to the berth." Rusk's eyes sharpened. "Ambassador," a tremor ran through the floor before Adrian could answer. A muffled blast rolled somewhere beyond the chamber wall. The lights dimmed and returned in amber emergency strips. Then the room display flared to life. The console displayed a line that read, "Security breach linked to human delegation sector." For one beat, nobody moved. Then everyone moved at once. Council officers turned toward the human delegation. The Tharos guards stepped forward. Russ did not flinch. That told Adrian more than the alarm itself. Nara snatched Tomas by the arm and yanked him behind a support column. "Down!" One officer advanced on Adrian. "By station order, You and your personnel will remain in custody pending review. What review? Adrian asked. Security review. Of the incident you staged before we arrived. The officer reached for him. Nara hit first, driving the man sideways hard enough to break contact. The chamber exploded into voices. Rusk stepped back from the chaos with almost graceful care. Detain them. There it was. No more theater. Adrian shoved the reception table into the path of the guards. Birth corridor. Move. The delegation broke for the only open exit. Nara drove ahead, creating space with speed and force. Tomas stumbled once, caught himself, and clutched his handheld unit to his chest like it mattered as much as a weapon. It might. They hit the corridor at a run. Behind them, alarms spread deeper through the ring. Ahead, security doors began dropping section by section. They're sealing the level, Nara said. Can you open a side route? Adrian asked Tomas. I'm trying. The port is rejecting command access. Somebody locked the district before the blast. That confirmed what Adrian feared most. The trap had been built first. The accusation had come second. A barrier crashed down at the far end of the main corridor. To their right, a recessed maintenance hatch sat half-hidden in the wall. Nera pointed. There. Tomas hit the access plate with trembling fingers. For one terrible beat, nothing happened. Then the hatch opened just wide enough. Inside, Adrian said. The delegation spilled into the narrow service passage as armed steps thundered into the main corridor behind them. Adrian was the last through. Before the hatch sealed, he looked back once at the polished diplomatic ring. A moment earlier, the place had still pretended to be civilized. Now all its elegance had collapsed into what it really was. A controlled district with cameras, barriers, and a story ready to file. It no longer looked like a place for treaties. It looked like a hunting ground. The first goal was simple enough to hold in one line. Get the surviving delegation out of the diplomatic ring, keep them together, and find one clean channel off Selene Nine before the station buried the truth under its own alarms. The service passage was narrow, dim, and loud with machinery. It had been built for technicians and cargo crews, not diplomats, and Adrian trusted it more immediately than any polished chamber above. Nara held the rear, listening for pursuit. Tomas tried to steady his breathing without losing his grip on the handheld unit. The rest of the delegation pressed close in the cramped dark, waiting for someone to name what this had become. Adrian did. This is no longer a negotiation. We are leaving the diplomatic sectors and heading for the outer service belt near the berth. Stay together and trust nobody in uniform. Linamar, the trade advisor, stared at him. You think the whole station is in on this? No, I think enough of it is in on this to get us killed if we move slowly. That was clear enough. Tomas checked the service map on his unit. This passage joins a maintenance spine above the cargo lifts. From there we can reach berth support and maybe a civilian line. Maybe, Adrian asked. If official channels are locked, local service traffic sometimes still leaks. Nara glanced ahead. Then move. They will not leave the diplomatic ring blind for long. They moved down a sloping service run where frost had formed in the floor corners and the lights were spaced too far apart. Every few steps, a fan kicked on somewhere behind the wall and sent a dry mechanical breath through the corridor. The farther they got from the main ring, the more the station felt like a funnel built by someone who already knew how prey would move. That was what made Selene Nine so dangerous now. It was not a battlefield full of chaos. It was an organized machine. The diplomatic level had hidden that under polished stone and council manners. The service levels did not bother hiding it at all. A tremor moved through the corridor. Somewhere above them, another seal slammed down. The station was changing shape around them, one locked layer at a time. At the next junction, Tomas slowed. Stop. Why? Adrian asked. Routing grid shifted. If we go straight, we may hit a hard seal. Nara peered into the cross corridor. Another route? Longer, Tomas said. Through refrigeration support and an old cargo loop. Cold storage. Lena asked. Yes. How cold? Cold enough the station expects freight, not people. We take it, Adrian said. Then the speakers changed. A new voice entered the corridor network. low, and controlled enough to chill the air more than the refrigeration lines did. All outer service personnel stand clear of transit access. Security containment is underway. Human delegation members are to be held for transfer. Civilian interference will be treated as obstruction. Nara stopped. That is not port security. No, Adrian said. That is someone above port security. They emerged into refrigeration support where frosted cargo lines ran in parallel and large insulated doors glowed blue under their status strips. Every sound traveled too far in the cold. Adrian motioned them into cover behind. A maintenance cart. Tomas, test the local line. Tomas plugged his unit into a service port. Status data crawled across the screen. I have stationed backbone echoes, he whispered. Not full access. Just scraps. Can you send anything out? Not yet. District filters are wrapping every outbound lane. Nara stayed low at the corridor edge. We do not have long. At the far end of the sector, a shutter lifted partway and stopped. Black armored figures moved through the gap with disciplined speed. At their center walked a man without hurry. Lean, close shave, precise. He did not look around because he already seemed to know where every exit, blind angle, and line of sight lay. Commander Severick. Tomas whispered the name after pulling a profile tag from across index cache. Tharos Internal Pursuit Command. Nara gave a grim nod. That explains the voice. Severick did not charge. He pointed once. 2 troopers peeled left. 2 went right. Another pair held the rear. He was not searching. He was reducing the sector. That made him worse than a loud killer. Loud killers created mistakes. Severick created narrowing lines. He hunted the way a system hunted, not a man. He is hurting us, Adrian said. Into what? Lena asked. Somewhere easier to seal. Severick's voice carried across the refrigerated space. Ambassador Vale. I know you're near birth support. You can make this shorter. Adrian did not answer. The station already believes you are responsible for the blast, Severick continued. The only choice left is whether you arrive in custody or as evidence arranged by other people. He wants us to react, Nara said. Because he knows where reaction leads, Adrian replied. Severick's troopers advanced in slow geometry. No wasted movement. No loud srits. Only angles, shrinking choices, and patience. Adrian pointed to a freight passage along the left wall. There, through cold storage, then cut toward the old cargo crossover. They moved crouched and tight through a colder section where frozen condensation cracked underfoot. Tomas nearly slipped, caught himself, then froze. Wait. Adrian turned. What? Tomas stared at the screen. I pulled a routing artifact from the wall port. Show me. He held up the unit. The fragment was incomplete, but one line mattered. The console displayed a line that read Containment Authorization Approved, District Outer Berth, effective upon arrival of human delegation. Adrian read it twice. The meaning did not change. Timestamp, he asked. More than an hour before our shuttle docked. Nara understood immediately. So the lockout came first. Yes, Adrian said. This was prepared before we ever arrived. That one sentence reset the whole situation. The blast had not caused the trap. It had only justified the trap after the fact. Tomas looked sick when he realized what he had pulled from the network. He was not a soldier, and Adrian could almost see the exact moment when the problem stopped being political in his mind and became personal. These people had not invited them into hard bargaining. They had invited them into custody with the paperwork already written. A metallic strike rang through the cold storage loop behind them. Then another. Severick's people had entered. Move, Nara said. They ran. The cold storage loop opened into an old cargo crossover where suspended rails intersected overhead and sealed loading pods sat in recessed bays. Warning strips glowed under frost. A freight sled hung motionless above them like a trapped blade. Somewhere behind, one of Severick's troopers struck a corner too fast and clipped metal, and that brief, ugly sound did more to speed the delegation than any shouted order could have done. Ahead stood a half-open emergency depot door. Inside, the group rushed through into a disused service bay full of retired equipment, spare housings, and dead cargo drones stacked against the walls. It was ugly, cramped, and hidden for the moment. Nara sealed the inner latch by hand. This buys us a minute. Tomas dropped to one knee and rechecked his unit. I kept the artifact. If I get one cleaner line, I can prove pre-authorization. Lena stared at Adrian. Prove it to whom? The people chasing us already know. Not to them, Adrian said. To anyone not yet trapped inside their story. Dallin, or one of the junior envoys, leaned against a rack. Then maybe we stay here, wait, and... No, Adrian said. This room is a coffin if they identify it. A measured impact struck the outer hatch. Then another. Severick, not rushing, confirming. Nara looked through the maintenance slit. He found the trail. At least 4 in the corridor. More behind. Tomas stood too fast. Then where do we go? Adrian looked at the faded depot map on the wall. Above them lay the outer service belt. Beneath that deeper in, the station, the transit and coordination spine. Deeper still, the central coordination core where district routing and long-range links were shaped. The most protected place left in Selene Nine. Also the one place that might still carry a line strong enough to cut through the station filters. We cannot hide in the outer belt, Adrian said. Not with Severick controlling the hunt. Lena stared at him. Then what are you saying? I'm saying we go deeper. Into the inner coordination levels. Tomas asked. Yes. That is the most secure section in the station. Which means it is also where they are shaping the record and protecting the lie. A harder strike hit the outer hatch. Metal groaned. Nara stepped back from the door. Decision now. Fear, exhaustion, and anger sat on every face in the room. But staying near the berth meant being peeled apart one compartment at a time until Selene Nine delivered whatever ending Tharos wanted. Adrian made the choice. We leave the outer sectors because Severick will strip them sector by sector until he finds us. We head for the coordination core because that is where the station still has real routing power. He looked at Tomas, then at the others. We already have enough to prove the trap was staged. Rust's audio. The pre-authorization log. Draft strike language. What we do not have yet is a line strong enough to get it beyond station control. The latch strip sparked. Nara drew her weapon. Then we use the lower service shaft. It should connect to an old utility descent. Tomas nodded fast. From there we can reach the lower transit levels. Adrian shoved aside a stack of retired panel frames until the hidden service grill appeared. The room they had used as shelter was already gone in any meaningful sense. It had only been a pause before worse danger. They dropped into the lower service shaft because there was nowhere else left to go. Their only chance now lay deeper inside Selene Nine, toward the coordination levels where the station shaped signals, locked records, and decided which version of events the outside worlds would hear. The shaft was steep and cold enough to numb the hands. Adrian went first. Tomas came after him with the unit strapped across his chest. Below Tomas climbed Lena, then Dallin, Suri Fun, and Merrick. Nara came last, watching the hatch above. At the bottom, Adrian landed on a graded platform and listened. The station sounded different here. Less ceremonial, more mechanical. Heavy motors turned behind the walls, and every few seconds the floor shivered as internal freight lines shifted loads farther inward. Nara sealed the lower hatch by hand. That will not hold. It does not need to, Adrian said. It only needs to cost them time. That was the new shape of survival. Nothing lasted. Every decision only bought enough room to make the next one. The utility trunk joined a service tunnel running beside one of the internal transport routes. Through narrow reinforced windows, Adrian could see freight platforms gliding on magnetic tracks toward the deeper core. Doors on the other side opened into control closets, cooling access points, and power junctions. The lower they went, the less Selene Nine resembled a diplomatic station, and the more it resembled the inside of a living device. Traffic was no longer meant to be seen here. It was meant to be managed, routed, delayed, approved, denied. Adrian understood then why the trap had been designed around the station instead of around soldiers alone. The station itself was part of the weapon. He stopped the group and gave them the clearest version of the plan he could. We need a line strong enough to push evidence beyond station control. Tomas finds it. I get us there. Nara keeps Severick from closing too fast. Everyone else stays close and keeps moving. No one argued. They started along the tunnel at a quick pace. Every time the route forked, Adrian anchored it out loud so no one would lose the map in their head. Left for transit support. Right goes back to cargo feeds. We keep left. A minute later he did again. Past the relay coolant stack. Ahead is the lower transit lane. We cross it for the coordination branch. Tomas checked the network as they moved. I have fragments. Internal handshakes, local permissions, security routing. The station is choking official lines, but maintenance traffic still leaks in places. Enough to use? Adrian asked. Enough to listen. Not enough to send. Nara raised a hand. Everyone stopped. At first Adrian heard only machinery. Then came a faint metallic strike from somewhere behind them. Another. A service door opening. Boots crossing a grating. He is following, Nara said. They ran again. The transit support corridor widened and dipped under a line of freight rails before opening into a large transport hall, where internal platforms paused before being redirected deeper into the station. Walkways hung above the tracks. Support columns broke the chamber into lanes. Two open to hide well. Two structured to improvise in. Adrian pointed to a maintenance bridge above the tracks. We cross there and take the coordination branch. Tomas glanced at his unit. The bridge station has local service nodes. Give me 1 minute and I may get a cleaner packet. Nara did not like the delay. 1 minute. No more. They crossed half the hall and reached the bridge. Tomas plugged into the service console. Adrian watched the rear approach while Nara took position farther back. The console flickered. Tomas's face changed. What? Adrian asked. I have voice packets. Play them. He kept the volume low. The first distorted voice still carried all its authority. Holden Rusk. Containment remains lawful under Emergency Article 12, the recording said. Public framing must remain consistent. The delegation cannot be allowed open transmission. The packet jumped. If Ambassador Vale dies in flight or disappears within restricted sectors, liability falls under active threat response. That gives the council what it needs. The speaker cut out. Lena stared at Tomas. He said lawful. Tomas's voice had gone thin. It is not lawful. It is dressed to sound lawful. That was Rusk's true role. Severick was the blade in the corridor, but Rusk had built the frame that would turn murder into procedure. Adrian could hear the machinery of it in those few clipped lines. Emergency article. Public framing. Liability transfer. Every phrase existed to make a killing look administrative from far enough away. It was not enough for the Rose to eliminate him. They needed the record to say they had been left no choice. Nara called from the corridor. They are here. Below them, Severick's troopers flowed into the transport hall with the same patient geometry Adrian had learned to fear. They did not rush. They took angles. One team moved toward the left track line, one toward the ladder on the right. Another held the rear. Severick entered last and stopped beneath the bridge. He looked up, calm and assessing, as if he had already walked this chamber in his head. You are deeper now, Ambassador, he called. That limits your choices. Adrian answered because silence no longer bought much. Your minister seems very interested in legal language. Severick's face did not move. Minister Rusk concerns himself with outcomes that look clean from a distance. I concern myself with outcomes that happen. You mean killing witnesses. I mean ending a problem before it spreads. Nara edged back toward the center of the bridge. He is stalling us. Yes. His people were still taking position. Tomas yanked the connector free. I got the packet. There may be another node ahead with more. Then we go, Adrian said. They ran across the bridge. One trooper fired a line disruptor at the support access, not to hit anyone directly, but to throw the group off balance. Dallin stumbled hard against the side rail. Lena grabbed him and dragged him upright. The far side of the bridge led into the coordination branch, a tighter corridor lined with locked service rooms. A sign ahead marked secondary coordination node. Tomas saw it too. That room may have district routing oversight. Not the full core, but enough to prove pre-authorization. The access plate denied Adrian. Tomas plugged into a maintenance slot, forced a service request through, and popped the lock. Inside, the room was compact and ugly in the useful way Adrian had come to value. Relay cabinets lined the walls. A central console sat in a low operator pit. Signal maps pulsed on suspended displays. Inside, Nera sealed the door as Tomas rushed to the console. Adrian watched the displays, waiting for the few words that would matter. He got them quickly. "Oh no," Tomas said. On the live event index, organized with bureaucratic calm, Adrian saw the chain that mattered. Diplomatic sector blast. Human aggression response. Emergency detention request. Frontier strike authorization draft. The timeline was already built. Tomas dragged open a linked record. The first security containment flag had been filed before the shuttle docked. The emergency detention language had been preloaded. The strike authorization draft already had half its fields filled in, waiting only for final event confirmation. Lena started. They wrote the story first. "Yes," Adrian said, "and they meant to fit us into it." A restricted memo fragment flashed long enough for Tomas to catch a surviving line. The console displayed a line that read, "Human delegation non-compliance, event acceptable trigger for preemptive corridor action." That was the heart of it. No real offer, no real path to peace. Just a stage built around a trigger. If Adrian died after resisting detention, the Empire would call it necessity. If he vanished in the lower sectors, the station would call it confusion during a security event. If any of his people fought back hard enough to leave a clean image on a corridor feed, Rusk would package the footage as proof that Earth had arrived ready for violence. Every path had been written to converge on the same result. They only needed a reason they could show the Council, Adrian said. A blast. A resisting delegation. A missing ambassador. Enough to justify a strike. A heavy impact hit the outer frame. Then another. Severick had reached the node. Tomas kept copying. "I need 30 seconds. "You do not have 30, Nera said. The impact stopped. That was worse. Adrian crossed the door and listened. Silence. No srets. No kaatik vrich. Severick was arranging the room from outside the way he arranged everything else. "What other exit do we have?" Adrian asked. Tomas checked the layout. Maintenance bypass through the rear conduit. It rejoins the lower core, lane 1, sector ahead. "Can it take all of us?" Single file. A whine rose through the wall seam. Nera looked at the pressure strip above the door. "He is cutting room systems." Lena's face tightened. "What does that mean?" "It means he wants us moving before we are ready," Adrian said. "Tomas, take what you have." Tomas ripped the data bridge free. "I have Rusk's audio, pre-authorization logs, and draft strike language. Not enough for full transmission. Then we carry it." The rear conduit hatch was hidden behind a relay cabinet. Adrian and Dallin shoved the cabinet aside until Tomas could reach the panel. The hatch opened with a shrill scrape. Behind them, the outer door tore inward at the top corner. White light slashed through the seam. "Nera," Adrian said. She checked the breach, the room angles, and the narrow escape route behind them. When she turned, her face was calm in the cruel way it became only when the situation had narrowed to one hard answer. "You all go through," she said. "I hold the breach for a few seconds." Lena shook her head at once. "No." Nera ignored her and looked at Adrian. "If we all try to leave together, Severick catches. Half the group in the doorway. If I stay, you clear the conduit." The outer door burst wider. A trooper showed in the opening and was driven back by Nera's first precise shot into the frame beside him. Adrian stepped closer. "If you stay, I may not get you back." There were years of shared service and unsaid things in the look she gave him. "If I go," she said quietly, "none of you get out." That was the truth. Lena made a tiny sound as if she still wanted to object, but no argument survived contact with the breach and the narrowing doorway. Tomas's face had gone white. Merrick had already understood the reality of it, which somehow made it worse. Another section of the door tore loose. The room flashed red. For one impossible second, Adrian imagined refusing, imagined staying beside her and turning the node into a final stand. But that was not courage. It was waste. Nera knew it. The look she gave him carried command as much as trust. She was not asking him to remember her. She was ordering him to keep the mission larger than the room. Go, she snapped. There was no room left for argument. Adrian shoved Tomas toward the conduit. Lena went next, then Dallin, Suri, and Merrick. Adrian stayed one heartbeat too long and looked back. Nara had taken cover behind the central console, using the room itself to break the line of entry. She glanced at him once more. Get that evidence out, she said. Make this count. And he was in the conduit. The hatch sealed partway behind him, leaving only a narrowing slit through which he saw the node chamber flash with white light and shadow. He heard 3 more sharp shots, a shouted order, and Nara's voice one last time. Move, Adrian. The conduit dropped steeply. Tomas slipped twice because his hand was shaking so badly. Adrian kept one hand on his back and forced the whole group down faster than fear wanted to let them move. When they spilled onto the lower core lane, the air was hotter and the machinery louder. Deep inside Selene 9, the station no longer felt like a port. It felt like the inside of a locked machine. No one spoke for several seconds. Lena finally asked the question anyway. Is she coming? Adrian looked back at the sealed hatch. I do not know. That hurt more than a clean answer. Tomas braced both hands on his knees. She bought us time. That is what she did. Adrian forced himself upright. Nara had not stayed behind, so he could stop here and let grief make him useless. What do we still have? He asked. Tomas checked the unit. Partial audio from Rusk. Pre-authorization records. Draft strike language. Enough to prove this was staged. Enough to matter? Yes. If we reach a real line, then we keep moving. The coordination core is still ahead. We finish what she bought for us. This time no one hesitated. The lower core lane fed into a half-abandoned storage compartment built into the outer wall of the signal sector. Tomas found the access by reading old route marks on a maintenance strip. Adrian got everyone inside, sealed the hatch, and finally let them stop. For the first time since the diplomatic ring, no one was running. That made the silence worse. Adrian counted again. Himself, Tomas, Lena, Dallin, Suri, Merrick. 6. Merrick broke the silence first. We need to say it. Adrian looked at the hatch for a second too long, then back to the group. Nara stayed behind so we could reach the core. We honor that by making it matter. No one answered, but the room changed. Not the grief. The direction of it. We check what we have, Adrian said. Then we move. Tomas placed the unit on an old equipment bench. I still have Rusk's audio, the pre-authorization logs, and the draft strike language. It is enough to expose the trap, but not if it dies on station mirrors. Merrick rubbed his face. Then what do you need? A real outbound route. The closest one is the main signal sector, specifically the synchronization room beside it. Lena stalled it. The most protected place left in the station. Yes, Tomas said. And that is exactly why we have to go there. The official channels are locked, but the station also has a civilian emergency relay mesh for freight accidents, docking failures, and broad port warnings. He tapped the rough map between them. That mesh is old, wide, and fast because it was built to alert every ship in range. The signal sector feeds it, but the synchronization room is where a burst can be forced into it before district filters clamp. Down. Merrick understood at once. If the evidence enters that mesh, it becomes public before the Rose can rewrite it. Only if Tomas reaches the room and takes synchronization control for a short burst, Adrian said. Tomas nodded. That room is the only place left where I can do that. Without it, we do not get the packet out. Without the packet, none of this matters. How short? Adrian asked. Tomas checked the timing wheel. 90 seconds. Maybe less. Adrian spread the projected map across a crate. Between the storage room and the synchronization sector lay a service corridor, a sensor spine, and the synchronization hall itself. Tight, direct, and almost certainly watched. We are done trying to escape quietly, Adrian said. From here on, the goal is not to get out first. The goal is to get the truth out first. He pointed to the route. That is why we cannot keep running for the berth. Severick controls the outer hunt, and the station controls the official record. If we go back up, they bury us and call it procedure. If we go forward, we may still lose, but the truth has one last path left. The others watched him carefully. 3 problems are waiting for us. Severick is the hunter. Rusk is the legal frame. Vorn is the final authority at the top of the chain. Lena asked, "So how we beat all 3? "We do not," Adrian said. "We make them interfere with each other." The logic came quickly after that. Severick could not act too openly if open action exposed the trap. Rusk could not allow public evidence. Vorn could not get his war if the authorization lost credibility before the fleet moved. Adrian made each step plain because this was not the moment for brilliance that only one person understood. "Tomas has to reach the synchronization room," he said. "That room is the only place with the control he needs to force a burst into the civilian mesh." He pointed to the outer approach. "I take the visible route. If Severick sees me there, he keeps reading me as the main threat." He shifted his finger to the side lane. Lena has a different job. She takes a side maintenance line and drags a false beacon across the network. Not to win by itself, just to make it look like the evidence is moving in the wrong direction. Then he pointed to the rear maintenance path. "Tomas does not come with me. Tomas goes through the back way with Dallin, Suri, and Merrick. That path runs behind the center room." He looked at each of them in turn. "That is Tomas's path. He and his team reach the room from the rear. That is Adrian's role. I get seen in the outer hall and pull Severick toward me." Lena had a different job. She makes the network lie for us just long enough to split his attention. Tomas looked up. "You want to use yourself as bait. I want to use what they expect. They think I am still trying to escape with the evidence. So I do the opposite. I carry nothing. Tomas carries everything. I make noise." That became the plan. Dallin, Suri, and Merrick would stay with Tomas and help him reach the synchronization room through the rear service route. Lena would peel away through a side maintenance line and drag a false beacon across the network. Adrian would appear in the outer approach openly enough to be seen, drawing Severick toward him while Tomas entered through the maintenance side. It was not elegant. That made it believable. Tomas built the decoy from a dead service transponder in the storage room, loading it with copied fragments of the evidence traffic and tuning it to pulse like a fleeing packet. "I am creating the false beacon here," Tomas said. "Once I trigger it, Lena keeps it moving. She pulls it farther across the network, so it looks alive and still running. It will not fool anyone smart forever," he added. "It only has to fool them long enough," Adrian said. Then Tomas checked the station timing again and went pale. "What?" Adrian asked. "The strike review package is no longer pending. It is in final staging." "How long?" "Less than 20 minutes before the authorization window." The room went still. That sharpened everything. No one in the storage room was thinking in abstractions anymore. Less than 20 minutes meant less than 1 station cycle to cross guarded sectors, deceive a pursuit commander, enter the most protected room left on Selene 9, and push evidence into open space before a manufactured war became legal fact. "We move in 3 minutes," Adrian said. They left the storage compartment and crossed a dark service run parallel to the main signal branch. The route was cramped and broken by old relay housings, but it kept them close enough for Tomas to read local traffic without stepping into the most visible lane. At the first split, Adrian stopped and anchored the phase clearly. "We are 1 sector from synchronization. Tomas, Merrick, Dallin, and Suri take the rear maintenance path when I say. That route goes behind the center room. Lena, you wait for Tomas to trigger the beacon, then you pull it across the side route and kill it at the marker. I take the outer hall where Severick can see me." Lena looked at him, and then, "I keep him busy." She did not like the answer, but she nodded. The service run ended at a narrow overlook above the synchronization hall. From there, Adrian finally saw the objective. The hall below was circular, built around a sealed center room of glass and metal where the synchronization console sat in a ring of pale light. 2 main corridors led in. A rear service ladder descended behind the room. Security posts stood at both obvious approaches, and Severick was already there. That sight hit harder than Adrian expected. It meant the commander had not simply been chasing them. He had been thinking ahead of them, building a second trap around the place where he knew any desperate delegation would eventually have to go. For one brief moment, Adrian understood how many people had probably failed in front of Severick because they mistook movement for initiative. The commander let people run until they arrived at the place he had already chosen. He stood near the main center room in trance, speaking to two black armored troopers while port technicians worked under watch near the side consoles. He had adapted. He was no longer hunting blind. He was guarding the one place Adrian needed. Tomas crouched beside the overlook. He locked the obvious routes. Good, Adrian said. Lena Puronet. Good. If he is guarding the obvious routes, he is still thinking in straight lines. Tomas followed Adrian's gaze to the rear service ladder. That ladder is old infrastructure. It is the maintenance path I told you about. In the center room, one sealed hall door, one manual rear service access. Tomas handed Adrian the armed beacon. If this fails, the evidence dies with us. Then do not fail. They checked timing. Once more, Tomas and his team would descend the rear ladder first. Once they were in place, Tomas would trigger the false beacon into the side maintenance route. Lena would pull it farther across the network from her sideline. Adrian would step into the outer approach where Severick's people could see him. Severick would have to choose. Chase Adrian and risk the signal room. Hold the signal room and risk the evidence slipping out through what looked like a fleeing maintenance packet. Adrian trusted pressure more than perfection. Tomas touched his arm before they split. If Nera were here, she would hate this. Adrian almost smiled. That is how I know it may work. Then they separated. Adrian took the outer route alone, moved down a maintenance stair, crossed a sensor spine, and emerged into the bright, exposed hall leading towards synchronization. He walked fast enough to be noticed and slow enough to make it clear he was not lost. A port technician saw him and froze. One of Severick's troopers turned, recognized him, and touched his comms line. That was enough. Adrian ran. Shouts rose behind him. Boots hit the floor. He slid behind a relay housing as a warning tone pulsed through the hall. Then Tomas triggered the beacon. Every security panel changed at once. A detection marker lit along the side maintenance route, showing an unauthorized packet moving away from synchronization. Severick reacted exactly as Adrian had hoped and feared. He stepped into the hall, looked once from Adrian's last position to the fresh moving packet trail, and calculated. The choice was ugly and immediate. Chase the visible ambassador, the face the whole trap had been built around, or stop what looked like the evidence breaking away toward another route. He pointed. Two troopers broke away toward the false packet. That was Lena's side of the plan now. Two more advanced on Adrian. Severick himself stayed in place for one breath longer, deciding which threat mattered more. Adrian rose from cover and ran again, making the answer easier. Behind him, he heard Severick's footsteps join the pursuit. Good. At the same time, Tomas and the others reached the rear service access. They moved down the ladder and into the maintenance channel behind the center room. Tomas's hands shook, but his thinking had gone cold and exact. The panel lock is manual, he whispered. That is good. Can you open it? Merrick asked. Yes, if the relay gods are feeling polite. The panel released. Inside, the synchronization console glowed in a ring of pale light. Back in the hall, Adrian dropped behind a support rib as a burst cracked past the edge of the column. Severick was still trying to keep the scene controlled, quiet, and deniable. That was his weakness. Severick stepped into view 20 paces away. You chose the loud route. Adrian kept breathing slow. You chose the wrong threat. Something flickered in Severick's expression. He touched his comms line at once. Too late. In the center room, Tomas dropped into the operator station, connected the data unit, and forced the evidence toward the civilian emergency mesh. The system fought him at once. District authority flags blocked the first route. Official traffic tried to override his burst. Synchronization prompts kept pushing him back toward station control channels. Merrick leaned over his shoulder. Is it sending? It is trying. Trying is not enough. It will have to be. Back in the hall, Severick stopped advancing. He was no longer thinking only about Adrian. He was thinking about the room behind him. A warning light flashed across the hall. The final strike order was close. Too close. Severick understood that and turned hard towards synchronization. The center room doors began to part. The center room doors were opening, and Adrian had only one goal left that mattered. Hold the system open long enough for Tomas to send the truth before Tharos turned Selene Nine into the legal spark of a war. The synchronization hall changed at once. Red warning bands swept the floor. Port screens flashed district alerts and routing shifts. Severick moved toward the center room with sudden speed, and Adrian moved to stop him. He did not need to beat Severick cleanly. He only needed to make the next few seconds belong to motion and interference instead of control. A burst cracked past Adrian's shoulder. He dropped behind a low console bank, rose just enough to see Severick redirect his troopers, and counted the problem instantly. 2 toward the room entrance. 2 toward the rear service side. 1 holding the corridor where the false packet had died. Severick had understood the trick. What mattered now was whether he had understood it too late. Inside the center room, Tomas bent over the synchronization console while Merrick watched the routing bars climb. Dallin and Suri stood at the rear access with emergency latches and tools in hand, not as soldiers, but as the last line, keeping the entry from swinging wide open. Tomas looked up through the glass. "I need more time." "How much?" Adrian asked. "More than he plans to give me." Lena came in from a side maintenance route, just as one of Severick's troopers reached the threshold. She slammed the emergency panel beside the entry, and the partial service shutter dropped halfway with a shriek of metal. It did not seal the room, but it narrowed the opening and forced anyone entering to crouch into a bad angle. That bought seconds. Severick stopped short of the door and looked through the narrowing gap at Tomas. Adrian saw the same calculation pass through him again. He still wanted a clean outcome, but the room was no longer set for clean outcomes. "Ambassador Vale," Severick said, "you are out of space." Adrian stepped out, just enough to stay the visible target. "No, you are out of clean options." A trooper raised his weapon. Severick cut him down with one gesture. He was not willing to rupture the synchronization systems before he knew what Tomas had already sent. That hesitation mattered. Inside the center room, Tomas reworked the packet structure under impossible pressure. The full archive was too dense for one clean burst, and the station was trying to bury it under official traffic. He had to think like a saboteur and an archivist at once. Which pieces would prove the trap fastest? Which ones would force witnesses outside the station to stop, look, and keep listening before district suppression could smother the rest? Halden Rusk arrived on the hall screens a moment later through some priority override Tomas had not blocked. His face appeared first on the far wall display, then on the side panels, cold and angry in the careful way of a man and used to watching his paperwork turn into blood. "Commander Severick," Rusk said, "the center room must be secured immediately. No unauthorized transmission can leave this station." Tomas looked up at that line and met Adrian's eyes through the glass. "Good." Rusk was already speaking too directly. Severick did not look away from the room. "Then stop talking and let me work." Rusk's jaw tightened. "The council review window is active. Marshal Vorn is waiting." That name changed the air. Kalis Vorn, the top of the chain. The man who did not need to run corridors himself, because other people built corridors for him. Tomas's fingers flew. "I can push the evidence, but the station is trying to override our packet with an emergency authority feed." Merrick leaned toward the side screen. "Can you block it?" "Not fully." Adrian saw the answer before Tomas said it. They were trying to get the lie out first. "Then do not send everything at once," Adrian said. "Send enough to force them to answer." Tomas understood at once. Outside, Severick sent one trooper low under the jam shutter. Lena drove a maintenance cart into the gap and knocked the trooper back before he could clear the threshold. Sparks burst from the bent frame. The room could still be forced, but not quickly. Adrian crossed to a side console, tore loose a portable control panel, and hurled it toward the opposite corridor. The crash wasted another trooper's aim and another second. Seconds were everything now. "Tomas," Adrian said, "what is the smallest piece that proves the trap?" Tomas swallowed. Rusk's voice packet and the pre-authorization timestamp. If those go wide first, they break the official story before the rest lands. "Do it," He could not send the whole archive in one shot because the station was choking large packets and trying to drown them under authority traffic. If he forced all of it at once, the system would stall, split it, and probably kill it. So he cut the evidence in two. The first packet had one job: break the lie immediately. Rust's voice, the pre-authorization time, proof that the lockout and the frame existed before the delegation ever docked. If that went public first, the official story died before anyone could rescue it. The synchronization console pulsed amber. Routing bars climbed. For a terrible moment, the system hesitated, then opened. Somewhere out in dock space, every listening vessel in range received the first fracture in Tharos' story. Freight crews heard the packet in cargo lanes. Civilian bridge officers heard it in docking traffic. Monitor ships heard it on channels built for warnings no one was supposed to ignore. That was the power of the old relay mesh. Once it opened, it did not care who preferred silence. Russ heard it too. Terminate that packet, he snapped. Immediate district suppression. Override civilian relay authority. There was not neutral procedure, not station safety. Raw command to suppress a transmission because he knew what it contained. Adrian looked up at the screen. Thank you. Rusk heard him. You are finished, Ambassador. No, Adrian said. You are. The hall displays changed again as a higher priority channel cut across Rusk's feed. The face that replaced part of the screen belonged to Kalis Vorn. He was older than Adrian had expected and looked almost tired, which made him worse. Men like that did not need anger. They only needed a machine they believed belonged to them. Selene Nine, Vorn said, explain this disruption. Rusk turned at once. Marshal, a false packet was forced through by the human delegation. Containment remains active. Final strike authorization should proceed. Tomas cracked a linked archive line Vorn's channel had exposed on the side display. A string of worlds flickered across the screen. Border incidents. Shipping panics. Emergency military protection requests. Each one tied back to the same approval pattern. Lena saw it and went still. This was not the first one. No, Adrian said. Tomas forced one summary open long enough to show the pattern clearly. Staged instability. Delayed communications. Controlled rescue offers. Permanent military presence afterward. The whole truth landed. This war with Earth was never a reaction, Adrian said. It was a business model. That changed the last layer. The first packet had broken the lie about Selene Nine. The second now had a larger job. It had to show this was not one dirty operation, but a repeat system, and that Vorn's office sat above it. It had to link Rusk to Vorn and link both of them to a pattern of manufactured crises that created military control afterward. And because that truth was now tied to Vorn's live authority channel, it could not be buried as easily as a dead ambassador in a corridor. Tomas, Adrian said, send the rest. Severick moved at the same time. He abandoned the quiet method at last. Two troopers hit the jammed entry together, while Severick advanced through the side of the hall toward the main console bank that controlled local shutters and hall feeds. If he could not keep the truth from existing, he could still try to cut the hall away from the relay long enough for Vorn's order to outrun. Adrian intercepted him. It was not graceful. Just two exhausted men colliding in a hall already half lost to warning lights and failing procedure. Severick was stronger and faster than Adrian had expected, but his strength lived in control and angles, not in chaos. Adrian used the only edge he had left. He did not need to beat Severick. He only needed to delay him. Severick slammed him into the side rail of the console bank. Pain lit across Adrian's ribs. He grabbed the edge, shoved back, and dragged a portable control stem down between them. It tore free in a shower of sparks and through the local shutter controls in a fault. The synchronization room doors froze half open. Good. Severick could not simply seal Tomas in and cut the rest away. Inside the room, the second evidence package surged outward. It carried the draft strike language, the linked crisis indexes, the routing chain above Rusk, and the pattern that tied those older emergencies back to Vorn's network. The first packet had shown the lie on Selene Nine. The second showed the machine behind it. Each piece hit the mesh and jumped ship to ship, port to port, receiver to receiver. Rusk heard the second wave and lost the last of his mask. Cut the hall, he barked. Disable synchronization. Use force if necessary. The words rolled across the open network. That was his end. No legal buffer remained in them. No neutral phrasing. Only panic from the man who had built the frame and could no longer stay inside it. Vorn turned toward him with cold contempt. Minister Rusk, you are making this worse. Worse. Rusk snapped. The packet names you. That line hit the network too. Merrick actually laughed once in disbelief. He just confirmed it. Keep sending, Adrian said. Severick heard the same thing and understood in real time that the mission he had been protecting was collapsing above him. He still tried to reach the hall controls. Adrian caught him again, using the wrecked console bank to turn the narrow space into a barrier. You are not winning, Ambassador, Severick said. Neither are you. That was true in the only way that mattered. He had failed to keep the hunt hidden. He had failed to deliver Adrian dead, missing, or silent before the truth hit open channels. The final transmission bar completed. Tomas looked up, as if he did not trust his own eyes. It is out. All of it. For one heartbeat, nobody moved. Then the hall speakers changed tone. Selene Nine was no longer warning of a human threat. It was warning of a district review breach, an emergency jurisdiction conflict. Port ships in local space were already requesting clarification. Civilian acknowledgments flooded the mesh. Outside the station, too many witnesses now held too much synchronized evidence for the Rose to flatten it back into one story. That was Kalis Vorn's failure. He had lost the narrative before the fleets moved. His image steadied on the wall display. Commander Severick, stand down from final suppression. We are moving to strategic denial. Stand down did not mean mercy. It meant Vorn knew that openly killing a now public human delegation inside the signal hall would only deepen the disaster. Russ tried once more. Marshal, if we still isolate the district. Vorn cut him off. No, you have already lost the district. Rusk's feed vanished from the main display. Whether Vorn cut him or the council did, Adrian could not tell. He only knew the architect of the trap no longer controlled the walls. The station answered next. The console displayed a line that read, all armed units in Signal District hold position pending council review. Merrick exhaled. That means they cannot bury us fast. It means they cannot do it clean, Adrian said. That was enough for the moment. He turned to Tomas. Can we verify district casualty logs? Tomas understood at once why he was asking. He pulled the emergency grid and searched the node sectors behind them. Several chambers were still redacted, but one status strip had updated under review conflict. There was a pressure breach in the secondary coordination node after we left, Tomas said. Then automatic fire suppression and seal collapse. He did not look up immediately. No registered life signs remained in the chamber. The words were quiet. The effect was not. Lena closed her eyes. Suri turned away and covered her mouth. Dallin stared at the floor. Adrian said nothing because anything he said would make it smaller than it was. He only nodded once. That was the price. Not abstract. Not poetic. Real. The hall settled into a strange, exhausted pause. Nothing felt safe, but the violence had lost its private cover. That mattered more than comfort. The station around them had changed in a way that could be felt even before it could be measured. It was no longer a place where one side could hunt in silence and file the ending afterward. Now too many ships were listening. Too many channels were recording. Too many outside hands had entered the same story at once. Severick felt it too. He was still dangerous, but no longer free to move the way he had before. Rusk had lost the clean legal mask that made his role powerful. Vorn had lost the one thing he needed most, which was control over how this would be remembered. Adrian let himself feel Nera's loss only in one narrow, measured way, because that was all he could survive in public. Nera had held a room so the truth could move. She had not died in a fleet battle or under a banner. She had died inside the machinery of a lie, and that fact hardened Adrian more than grief softened him. A human delegation had come to Selene Nine to hear surrender terms and had instead uncovered a war market dressed as law. Nera had stayed behind so the truth could outrun the lie, and now it had. External traffic changed almost immediately. Nearby civilian ships held position instead of clearing space for a strike corridor. 2 independent freight captains requested neutral oversight boarding. A Freeport legal beacon offered witness shelter under emergency transparency doctrine. 1 council monitor vessel that had been silent since the delegation arrived switched from passive watch to active inquiry. Selene Nine was no longer a private theater. It was evidence. The station did not become safe. It became contested, which was the most the survivors could ask for. That distinction mattered. Safe would have meant the machine had changed its nature. Contested only meant other eyes had entered the room. But after everything that had happened on Selene Nine, other eyes were enough to keep the dead from being rewritten into paperwork. Under emergency review, the surviving members of the human delegation were moved from the synchronization hall to a neutral transit berth overseen by council monitors, independent port legal staff, and enough civilian witnesses to make another disappearance impossible. The walk there was not a march of victory. It was slow, overbright, and heavy with the kind of exhaustion that comes after the body realizes is still alive. Severick and his troopers were ordered out of direct contact, pending inquiry. Adrian saw Severick only once more, through a corridor window, as both groups were escorted in opposite directions. The commander stopped for half a second when their lines crossed. He did not look defeated in the ordinary sense. He looked like a man who had executed his role precisely and still watched the larger machine fail around him. Adrian kept walking. At the neutral berth, the survivors finally had room to breathe, though none of them used it well. Tomas surrendered the copied evidence package to 3 separate legal archives before he let himself sit down. Merrick gave a statement so precise it sounded almost mechanical. Lena insisted on verifying every surviving relay acknowledgement from local ships. Adrian stood apart from them for a while, looking through the berth window at the white drift of Marivar's ice ring. Selene Nine looked unchanged from the outside. That felt obscene. A council legal officer approached with a sealed tablet. Preliminary review has suspended all strike authorizations linked to the Selene Nine incident. Emergency inquiry will extend to prior frontier crises connected to Marshal Vorn's office. Adrian took the tablet. And Rusk, removed from district authority and placed under review. Severick, operational custody restriction pending testimony. That was not justice. Not yet. But it was the collapse of the script, and that had to come first. And my people, you are under witness protection status until transfer. Adrian gave a small nod. Then Selene Nine has finally learned how to use the word protection. Later, when the berth had quieted and the others had drifted into exhausted silence, Tomas came to stand beside him at the window. We stopped the strike, Tomas said. Yes. We exposed Rusk. We exposed Vorn. We broke the chain. Yes. Tomas waited, then said the part neither of them could avoid. It still does not feel like winning. Adrian looked out at the ice. That is because it is not winning. It is surviving with purpose. Tomas took that in slowly. Nara would have hated that answer. This time Adrian did smile, though only for a second. Yes, she would. By the next station cycle, the first outside analysis channels had started repeating the same core line in a dozen forms. The Selene Nine incident was no longer a case of human aggression. It was the unraveling of a staged corridor war. The place built to bury the delegation had become the place that broke the excuse. When transfer clearance finally came, Adrian led the surviving delegation back toward a secured shuttle berth under neutral escort. The route passed one darkened corridor that descended toward the lower core. He did not stop there, but he knew where it led. A sealed node. A lost chamber. A debt that would never become small enough for official language. The station around them was quieter now, but not calmer. Council monitors moved in visible pairs. Independent port staff logged every transfer. Civilian witnesses had not gone away. That mattered. Selene Nine could still lie in fragments, but it could no longer lie alone. At the shuttle hatch, Lena paused beside him. What happens next? He answered honestly. For Selene Nine, review. Trials, maybe. For the frontier, delay. For the people who built this system, damage they cannot hide. And for you, I testify. Adrian said. Then I see what is left worth defending. They boarded. As the shuttle lifted from Selene 9, Tomas checked one last sweep of the open relay mesh. Most of it was noise now. Legal feeds, witness requests, traffic holds, analysis chatter. But buried among them was one encrypted ping from an unknown source outside local council channels. Not a threat, not a demand, just a short route request waiting for acknowledgement. Adrian, Tomas said. Adrian turned. Someone out there wants private contact. No identification, just a clean route request. Adrian looked at the marker for a moment, then out at the white curve of Marivar's ring beyond the shuttle glass. Selene 9 was behind them. Its lie was broken. Its dead were real. Its war had been stopped, at least for now. Let wait, he said. We're not done with this one yet. Tomas did not argue. None of them had the strength for another secret before they had even finished surviving the first one. The shuttle turned toward open space, carrying survivors, witnesses, and a truth that had cost too much to lose. Selene 9 was supposed to become a grave for the truth. Instead, it became the place where the lie broke open. Adrian Vale and the few who walked out of that station did not leave with triumph. They left with proof, with scars now. Report could measure, and with the weight of those who never made it back. The war Tharos had tried to ignite in silence was stopped in the open, where everyone could finally see it for what it was. That was the only clean thing left in the whole affair. Not justice, not peace, only exposure. Sometimes that is all history gives the living. A moment when the record refuses to obey the powerful. And on Selene 9, that refusal had been enough, at least for one station cycle, one delegation, and one narrow stretch of history that had almost been sealed shut forever. If this story stayed with you, if it gave you something to feel, something to think about, or someone to remember, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who loves science fiction, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps keep these stories alive, and if you're still here at the end, then you were part of this journey too, all the way through Selene 9. Thank you for listening.